Hi, I'm Glenn Everett, master of machines. This episode, we visited Rick Schmidt at National Parts Depot in Ocala, Florida, USA, to take a look at his family's enormous car collection accumulated over 30 years. Join us for part one of this epic feature where we select some beautiful examples to showcase. Well, here we are with Rick Schmidt, the owner of this magnificent collection. Rick, it's fantastic to be here and thanks for having us along.
Oh, you're very welcome. Glad you could come.
And you've got an enormous collection here, and our biggest challenge today is we can't go through every car, so we've chosen a handful.
Okay.
Can we start with this one right here?
Yeah, that's a 1966 Oldsmobile Toronado. It only has a little bit over 1,200 original miles on it. I believe it's probably the lowest mile original Toronado in existence. 66 was the very first year for the Toronado. That was Motor Trend's Car of the Year, the first mass-produced front-wheel drive vehicle for General Motors.
So it would be unique with front drive and a big engine. Tell us about the power plant in these cars.
That was a 425 Oldsmobile V8, and the engineering of it is fantastic. It's one of the favorite cars in the collection. It even has its original tires still, which were unique to the Toronado. They were Uniroyal T-FD, which stood for Toronado Front Drive. The owner of the car contacted me and said, "I hear you like low-mile stuff. You might be interested in my Toronado," so I went to visit him. He lived in a very modest neighborhood in northern Tampa. The car sat in a one-car garage, and he had sawed a hole in his living room wall so that the air conditioning inside the house would waft out into the garage to help to keep the car.
Tell us about this 56 Chevy Convertible here.
This is another example where colors and options really won the day with us. Another convertible, another restored car.
And what power plant does this one run?
This has the 265 power pack with an automatic transmission.
So the iconic small block Chevy
Yes.
at its very early stage.
Yes.
They really are an iconic series of vehicles through that
Yes.
55 through 57, the Chevys, aren't they?
So iconic, and that drives the values up. Everybody has a 55 through 7 Chevrolet story. It seems like everybody's parents or grandparents or great-grandparents had a 55 through 57 Chevy at some time. And it's that nostalgia that really drives up the values on these cars. Because if you actually drove the car and then you drove a comparable year Cadillac, there's a huge difference in quality between the two machines, the Cadillac being a far more better driving car. Yet, in most cases, a decent shape Bel Air convertible will outpace a same year Cadillac.
Rick, now here's a car that gets my heart racing, the Pontiac GTO. Tell us about this machine.
Well, this is a 1966 GTO, and it's a beautiful piece. I've had the 67 next to it for many, many years. In fact, I was driven home from the hospital when I was born in a 1967 GTO, but I picked this one up about 3 years ago. It's a fully restored car. Most of the cars in my collection are unrestored survivors, but this one's a drop-dead gorgeous full nut and bolt restoration with all the right equipment. It's a 389 with the tri-power option. The 66 and 7 GTOs are my favorite of the whole span of GTOs from 1964 through 72.
And with the Pontiac GTO, the earlier versions were actually probably the car that really did start that muscle car scene, didn't they, really? The
Yes.
muscle car wars.
Well, you know, sometimes people get a little carried away with all the semantics of what is a muscle car, because there were plenty of fast cars coming out of Detroit prior to 1964. But 1964 was really the first time that a manufacturer took one of their top performance engines from the full-sized car line and stuffed it into one of their mid-sized offerings. Plenty of other competitors came after that, but that was really what marked, you know, the muscle car was the big engine in a slightly lighter body.
Got the ball rolling.
Yes, yes.
Obviously, you're a very passionate car enthusiast. Tell us about this absolutely magnificent car collection you've got here.
Well, ever since I was a kid, up until the evolution of NPD, my father was always playing around and dabbling with cars. He'd buy a used car for cheap. He would fix it up a little bit. Usually he always bought quality stuff, so the fixing up was really just getting it tuned up and driving right and cleaning her up in some way, and then usually it would get spun off for a profit. And that kind of helped sponsor mine and my sister's college funds. Most of the cars we scouted and we purchased together, because we usually went out onto auctions and to swap meets together as a team. And none of us ever expected to get this out of hand.
Well, I love a 63 Impala, but this isn't just your everyday ordinary 63 Impala. This is a very special car, isn't it?
Very special 63 Impala. This is the actual 50 millionth unit built by Chevrolet. The 50 millionth car to roll off one of their assembly lines. It was built at the Tarrytown, New York plant. Nelson Rockefeller was the governor of New York at the time. I have photographs of the car from newspaper clippings of him driving the car off the assembly line with a big 50 millionth sign on top of it.
Wow.
Big fanfare. The car wound up, it was loaned to dealerships for promotional use in the 60s. And it wound up at a dealership just south of Detroit, and due to a paperwork flub, that dealership wound up sending in a check to pay for the car and was issued the certificate of origin. And when GM came to pick the car up, they said, no, we've owned that car now. So it lived at that dealership for all the way up until the mid-80s, until it was finally discovered again.
Wow.
When we acquired it, it had only 92 miles on it. But it was a little bit beat up just from sitting all those years. We just carefully disassembled the whole entire thing, refinished all the original components to look like brand new, and reassembled it all back together and got her running and operating like a proper car so it could be proud again. And I think it's got about 155 miles on it today, still sitting on its original tires, and it's just an amazing car.
And I noticed it sports a 409 engine.
Yes, it's the entry-level 409, the 340 horsepower version with just a 2-speed power glide automatic transmission. They wanted it to be civilized and easy to drive because they were going to have a dignitary driving it off the assembly line, so having the 425 horse version with the 4-speed, something could have happened, right? He could have driven right through the opposite wall of the factory. So.
Here's a classic 50s shape, this beautiful Crown Victoria. Tell us about this one, Rick.
That's a 1955 Crown Victoria. Beautiful car to look at. That's what we thought when we bought it. Bought the car, did the paperwork, grabbed the keys. I went to pull it out of the holding lot, and the whole entire power steering system puked out from underneath it, and we had to tow it out of there. And then once we started learning more about the car, we've taken the interior out, redone it, obviously fixed the steering issues, retuned, checked everything, rebuilt as necessary. I think we've had the car now for 9 years, and Larry finally got her button back up about a few months ago, so it's finally running, driving, fun, nice. I'm happy with the final outcome. She's a beautiful car.
So Rick, tell me how many cars you've got in your collection now up to date.
We just crested 200 vehicles in the last couple of months. In fact, I just bought 2 more recently, so I think I'm at 202. I keep telling myself that that's going to be it because we also pride ourselves in keeping all the cars in good operable condition. Even when the cars only have 5 miles on the odometer, we still start it periodically and keep things, you know, as if you could drive out the door and drive it, and sometimes we do, depending on the mileage. I exercise all of the collection, but at 200, trying to keep up with all of this and also run the business is becoming more than one person can sleep at night with.
And Rick, this spectacular Pontiac Convertible, and the red absolutely pops. Tell us about this car.
Yeah, this is a real showstopper, and it's another restored car. It's the exception and not the norm in our collection, but it's a top line, the colors, fully optioned, power windows. It was one of those cars that just ticked all of the boxes. This is one of the few cars that my dad bought without me there. He was off at a show somewhere and went to the auction and picked this up. And it's just real eye candy. And we don't have a whole lot of convertibles in our collection because we're big fans of styling, huge fans of styling of the 50s and 60s. And usually with the convertible, you don't have that roof line, that styled roof line that's part of the car's overall shape. So we've always trended towards coupe, but this car in convertible form is just an absolute winner. So
effectively, the roof really needs to be down to take full advantage of the, yes, of the convertible look and feel. But yep, it was a real iconic era, that 50s era. The shape was very similar between the GM and
yes,
Pontiac brands, wasn't it?
They were beginning to look like a family, but they really weren't yet. Very close though. Towards the late 50s, that's when things started to homogenize.
Well, it was an iconic era, and an era that I'm starting to gain more and more interest in as I get older, I'm finding. So here's a car that was reserved for the very wealthy in the day, in the 50s, this Lincoln Continental.
Yes, the Continental Mark II was a very expensive car for its day. They retailed for just a tad over $10,000.
Wow.
You could buy 2 top-line Cadillacs for the cost of 1 Mark II, or 3 Corvettes, just to give you a little bit of context for how expensive these cars were. They were hand-built This was Ford's exercise in trying to do something on a Rolls-Royce level of quality and exclusivity. William Clay Ford Sr. was the leader of the Continental division, and this is his personal car. He also in 1968 had this car upgraded by Ford Engineering with 1968.5 Mark III driveline. So it has a 460 V8 with a C6 transmission, power disc brakes, all the work done within the walls of Ford, so it's still acceptable to show at AACA levels as a factory car because the factory made all of the modifications.
Wow.
And so it's a very special Mark II, and we actually have a collection of 3 Mark IIs here.
I noticed there's 2 others parked here.
They all have connections to the Ford family. This was William Clay Sr.'s car. The black one was ordered new by his brother, Henry Ford II, for his wife Anne. And then there's a green one past that belonged to Benson Ford. So all 3 brothers, all 3 of Henry Ford's grandsons
Owned these cars.
So it's
Wow,
this is probably
amazing.
the crown jewel of our entire collection is this set of 3 Continentals.
Stay tuned for our next episode to see part 2 of our feature on this incredible collection. Be sure to subscribe to our channel and click the notifications bell because there's a lot more content coming your way.